I'm Amber Reynolds, 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living a dream life with my husband Nathan. 5 years of marriage shattered in one horrible night at Elysium, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I never imagined my own husband would call me a disgrace in front of his wealthy colleagues before abandoning me with a $5,000 bill. Looking back, the warning signs were there since his promotion, but love had blinded me to the truth. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more real-life experiences like mine. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where my father worked as a mechanic and my mother as a receptionist at a local clinic. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. My parents taught me the value of hard work, honesty, and treating others with respect, regardless of their status. They saved enough to help me attend college, where I pursued my passion for education. During my senior year, I received a scholarship to continue into a master's program in elementary education. That's where I met Nathan Reynolds. He was pursuing his MBA, always dressed impeccably in designer clothes that I later learned were purchased with his trust fund. What attracted me to Nathan wasn't his wealth, but his apparent drive and ambition. He spoke passionately about creating something meaningful in the business world, not just making money. "I want to build something that matters," he told me on our third date at a small coffee shop near campus. "Money is just a tool to make a difference." I believed him. I fell for his confidence, his articulate way of expressing himself, and what I perceived as shared values. When we discussed our future, he seemed genuinely supportive of my teaching aspirations. "The world needs dedicated teachers," he said. "What could be more important than shaping young minds?" After graduation, I secured a position teaching third grade at Westbrook Elementary, while Nathan landed a job at Morgan Financial, a prestigious investment firm. We married a year later in a modest ceremony, combining our different backgrounds in what I thought was a perfect blend of his sophistication and my down-to-earth practicality. The first 4 years of our marriage had their ups and downs, but we seemed to work through them. Nathan climbed the corporate ladder steadily, while I poured my heart into my classroom, eventually becoming the grade-level lead and winning the district's Teacher Excellence Award 2 years in a row. Our social circle initially consisted of a mix of my fellow teachers and Nathan's junior colleagues. We hosted casual dinner parties in our comfortable but not extravagant home, went hiking on weekends, and volunteered at the local food bank during holidays. Those were the days when Nathan still laughed freely, helped with dishes after having friends over, and seemed proud to introduce me as his wife. Everything changed 6 months ago when Nathan received a major promotion to Vice President of Sales at Morgan Financial. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, stock options, and a different level of professional connections. I was genuinely happy for him. He had worked hard, often staying late, and bringing work home on weekends. "We should celebrate," I suggested when he shared the news. "Maybe invite our friends over for a barbecue this weekend?" Nathan's response was the first indication of the shift in our relationship. "A barbecue?" He looked almost offended. "Amber, this is a major career milestone. I was thinking more along the lines of dining at Castell." Castell was a Michelin-starred restaurant where dinner for two easily exceeded $500. We went to Castell, and Nathan spent the entire evening on his phone, texting his new team and accepting congratulations from his superiors. When I tried to engage him in conversation about what this change might mean for our work-life balance, he dismissed my concerns. "This is what success looks like, Amber. We need to adapt." And adapt we did, but not as partners. Nathan began arriving home later, often smelling of expensive scotch and cigars from necessary networking events. Our weekend hikes were replaced by his golf outings with executives. My teacher friends suddenly weren't appropriate to invite over when his colleagues might drop by. The criticisms started small. "Do you have anything else to wear?" he asked one evening, when we were preparing to meet his new boss for drinks. "What's wrong with this?" I looked down at my floral dress from Macy's, one he had previously complimented. "It looks a bit teachery, don't you think?" The way he said teachery made my profession sound like a flaw. As weeks passed, the comments multiplied. "Maybe ease up on the public school anecdotes at dinner. No one really relates to those stories. You might want to consider upgrading your wardrobe now that we're in different circles. Did you have to mention you grew up in Michigan? Just saying you're from the Midwest is sufficient. Each criticism chipped away at my confidence, but I rationalized his behavior. Nathan was under pressure in his new role. He was adjusting to different expectations. I told myself things would normalize once he settled in. Instead, our social circle transformed completely. Gone were our mutual friends, replaced by Nathan's business associates and their impeccably polished wives. Women who carried handbags that cost more than my monthly salary, who discussed their vacation homes and private jets while I struggled to contribute to conversations about destinations I had only seen in magazines. I tried to adapt. I watched YouTube tutorials on wine etiquette, read up on current events to have intelligent things to say, and stretched our credit card to purchase a few designer items so I wouldn't stand out so obviously. But the gulf between Nathan's world and mine widened regardless of my efforts. Then came the invitation that would expose every crack in our marriage. Richard Kensington is bringing his wife to dinner next Friday, Nathan announced one evening in May. Richard was the CEO of Morgan Financial. Bradley Thompson and his wife will be there too. That sounds important, I replied cautiously. Where are they thinking of going? Elysium. And I need you there. Richard specifically asked if you would be joining us. Elysium wasn't just expensive. It was exclusive to the point of having a 3-month waiting list, unless you were someone of importance. The kind of place where the menu didn't list prices because, as the saying goes, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Are you sure you want me there? I asked, remembering his recent criticisms. Of course, Nathan said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Just follow my lead, okay? These relationships are critical for my career. What he didn't say, but what I understood clearly. Don't embarrass me. Be someone other than yourself. The woman I married isn't good enough for this table. Despite the knot forming in my stomach, I nodded. I'll be there. I didn't realize then that this dinner wouldn't just test our marriage, it would end it. The 2 weeks leading up to the dinner at Elysium were filled with anxiety. I spent hours researching the restaurant online, reading reviews, and studying photos to prepare myself for the environment. I wanted so desperately to fit in, to make Nathan proud, to prove I could belong in his new world. After school one day, I went shopping for a new dress. I visited several department stores before finding a black Donna Karan sheath dress on sale at Nordstrom. It was simple but elegant, with a classic silhouette that the saleswoman assured me would be perfect for an upscale restaurant. Even discounted, it cost me nearly 2 weeks of my teaching salary. But I convinced myself it was an investment in our marriage. The day of the dinner arrived. I left school early to have enough time to prepare, scheduling a blowout at a salon. Nathan had once mentioned his colleagues' wives frequented. The stylist straightened my naturally wavy auburn hair into a sleek, sophisticated style that made me look like a different person. I applied makeup carefully, aiming for a polished look that wouldn't appear too obvious or amateur. When Nathan arrived home, I was putting the finishing touches on my appearance, securing small diamond earrings that had been a gift from my parents on our wedding day. "You're wearing that?" were his first words when he saw me. My heart sank. "What's wrong with it?" he sighed, loosening his tie. "Nothing's wrong with it. It's just basic. Madison Kensington will probably be in Valentino or Gucci." "I can't afford Valentino or Gucci, Nathan. This is Donna Karan, and it was expensive for me." I know. He waved his hand dismissively. "It'll have to do. Just make sure you don't mention how much it cost, or that it was on sale." While Nathan showered, I fought back tears as I reapplied my mascara. When had my husband become so ashamed of me? When had my middle-class background become something to hide? Nathan emerged from our bedroom in a tailored suit that probably cost more than all the clothes in my closet combined. He looked handsome but unrecognizable, like he was playing a character in a film about wealthy executives. "Ready?" he asked, checking his Rolex. "Another recent acquisition." "As I'll ever be," I replied, attempting a smile that didn't reach my eyes. We drove to Elysium in tense silence. The restaurant was located in the financial district, occupying the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper with views overlooking the entire city. A valet approached as soon as Nathan pulled up in his new BMW. "Good evening, sir, madam," the young man said, opening my door with practiced precision. Nathan handed over his keys with a casual confidence I used to find attractive but now seemed performative. "Take good care of her," he said, referring to the car with more affection than he'd shown me all evening. The entrance to Elysium was intimidating. Massive glass doors with gold handles led into a marble foyer where a beautiful hostess stood behind a podium that resembled a piece of modern sculpture. "Reservation for Kensington," Nathan said. "We're joining their party." The hostess's demeanor changed instantly, becoming even more deferential. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. Kensington and his party have already arrived. Please follow me." We were led through the main dining room, a space designed to impress with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city lights. Every table was positioned to provide privacy, with enough distance to ensure conversations wouldn't be overheard. The other diners exuded wealth and importance. Politicians, celebrities, and business titans engaged in quiet conversation over wine glasses that caught the light like diamonds. Our destination was a private alcove with a round table set for 6. As we approached, 4 people rose to greet us. Richard Kensington, the CEO, was in his late 50s with silver hair and the confident posture of a man accustomed to power. Beside him stood a woman who could have stepped off a magazine cover, Madison Kensington, perhaps 40, with the kind of beauty that comes from both good genes and expensive maintenance. Bradley Thompson, the CFO, was younger than Richard, around 40, with a perpetual expression of calculation. His wife, Heather, was blonde and fit, wearing a red dress that undoubtedly cost thousands. "Nathan, glad you could join us," Richard extended his hand, "and this must be the elusive Mrs. Reynolds. We were beginning to think Nathan was keeping you all to himself." "Amber," I said, offering my hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Kensington." "Richard, please. We're not formal here, are we?" He smiled, but his eyes were assessing me with the same scrutiny I imagined he applied to investment opportunities. "Madison." His wife introduced herself with an air kiss near my cheek. Her perfume was subtle but expensive, and her jewelry caught the light with every movement. "That's a lovely dress." The comment seemed genuine, but something in her tone suggested surprise, as if she'd expected worse. Introductions continued with Bradley and Heather, both offering polite but cool greetings. The women's eyes flickered over my appearance, noting my dress, my shoes, my handbag, cataloging each item, and undoubtedly calculating their worth. "Shall we sit?" Richard gestured to the table. Nathan pulled out my chair, leaning down to whisper, "Remember, follow my lead," before taking his seat beside Richard. A server appeared immediately. "May I bring you something to drink?" Before anyone could respond, Richard spoke. "We'll start with the 2010 Domaine de la Romanée Conti Latache. 2 bottles." The server nodded appreciatively. "An excellent choice, sir." I didn't recognize the wine, but Nathan's slight intake of breath told me it was significant. Later, I would learn that each bottle cost over $5,000. "So, Amber," Madison turned to me as the server departed. "Nathan tells us you're a teacher? How quaint." "I teach 3rd grade at Westbrook Elementary," I replied, trying to infuse my voice with confidence. "I've been there for 6 years now." "Public school, isn't it?" Heather asked, though she clearly knew the answer. "Yes, it is." She exchanged glances with Madison. "Our children attend Lakeside Academy. Do you know it?" The question was a trap. Lakeside was the most prestigious private school in the state, with annual tuition higher than many colleges. "I've heard wonderful things about their program," I said diplomatically. "Their STEM curriculum is unparalleled," Heather continued. "Cooper has already been accepted to the Johns Hopkins summer program for gifted children. He's only 9. "That's impressive," I said sincerely. "Children that age have such capacity for learning when they're given the right opportunities." Nathan shifted beside me, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. "Speaking of opportunities," he interjected, "Richard, How was the conference in Zurich? Just like that, I was excluded from the conversation. The men launched into a discussion about international markets, while Madison and Heather began talking about their upcoming trip to the Maldives, where apparently they had both rented private islands. You and Nathan should join us, Madison said, though her tone made it clear this was merely a formality, not an actual invitation. The resort has the most divine spa treatments. That sounds lovely, I murmured, trying to imagine how many years of teaching it would take to afford even one night at such a place. The sommelier returned with the wine, presenting the bottle to Richard with reverence, before going through an elaborate tasting ritual. Once approved, he poured for everyone at the table. I took a small sip and was surprised by the complexity of flavors. It was undoubtedly the finest wine I'd ever tasted, but I couldn't imagine any beverage being worth thousands of dollars. Nathan tells us you're from the Midwest originally? Madison asked as appetizers began arriving. Tiny portions of artfully arranged seafood that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. Yes, Michigan, I replied. Nathan cut in smoothly. Amber's family has deep roots in the region. The way he phrased it made my middle-class upbringing sound almost aristocratic, as if I came from old money tied to the automobile industry rather than a modest home where my father fixed cars for a living. As the evening progressed, I noticed how Nathan had transformed himself. His voice had taken on a different cadence. His laugh was louder and more frequent, and he kept dropping names and references that were foreign to me. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone performing for approval. The performance extended to ordering. When it came time for the main course, Nathan took charge for the entire table, selecting dishes without consulting anyone, least of all me. The Wagyu for the table, he told the server. And we'll need another bottle of the La Tâche. With each dish and each bottle, I mentally calculated the mounting bill with growing alarm. A quick estimate put us already over $3,000. And we hadn't even reached dessert. As the main courses arrived, beautifully presented, but with portions that would leave anyone still hungry, I realized I had barely spoken 10 sentences all evening. Each time I tried to join the conversation, it would shift to topics that excluded me. Exclusive clubs I didn't belong to, vacation destinations I had never visited, people I had never met. I was a stranger at this table, and worse, my husband seemed to prefer it that way. The conversation drifted to summer plans as we sampled our exquisitely prepared but minuscule main courses. Madison delicately cut into her scallops as she detailed their annual retreat to Martha's Vineyard. We've had the same beachfront property for 20 years, she said. It's been in Richard's family for generations. The Historical Society keeps trying to designate it as some sort of landmark, but Richard's lawyers have been marvelous at keeping the bureaucrats at bay. We're just down the coast from the Kennedys, Richard added casually, as if referring to neighbors in a suburban development, rather than one of America's most famous political dynasties. What about you, Amber? Heather asked. Do you and Nathan have a summer place? Before I could respond, Nathan jumped in. We've been looking at properties in the Hamptons, actually. Nothing too ostentatious, just a little weekend retreat. I nearly choked on my wine. This was the first I'd heard of any such plans. Our last vacation had been a weekend trip to a lake cabin, rented through Airbnb. The Hamptons can be rather overexposed these days, Bradley commented. So many new money types buying up property. We've been spending more time at our place in Nantucket for that reason. Exactly why we're being selective, Nathan agreed smoothly. Quality over location. Madison turned to me. And what about your family, Amber? Do they summer anywhere interesting? The phrasing of her question, the use of summer as a verb, highlighted the gulf between our worlds. My parents' idea of a summer vacation was a week at a rented cottage near Lake Michigan, where we'd cook our own meals and spend days on the public beach. My family enjoys Michigan's lake shores, I said honestly. The Great Lakes are beautiful in summer. Michigan? Madison repeated, as if trying to recall where exactly that might be on a map. How? Rustic. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Amber's brother has a place on Lake Michigan. Very exclusive area. It was a lie. My brother lived in an apartment in Chicago and could barely afford his rent, let alone a lake house. So, Nathan tells us you teach at a public school? Richard asked, changing the subject in a way that wasn't much better. Yes, third grade. I just completed my 6th year. Admirable, he said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. I've always thought teachers were underpaid, considering their importance. Though I suppose the summers off must be nice compensation. I bit my tongue to keep from explaining that teachers work through much of the summer on professional development, curriculum planning, and classroom preparation, often unpaid. It's not about the money for Amber, Nathan said, reaching for my hand in what appeared to be a supportive gesture, but felt like a warning. She's dedicated to her students. Speaking of education, Heather interjected, did you hear about the fundraiser at Lakeside? They raised $12 million in one night for the new Performing Arts Center. Bradley donated enough to get the main theater named after us. The Thompson Theater has a nice ring to it, Bradley said with false modesty. Nathan, Morgan Financial should consider increasing its charitable giving to education, Richard suggested. Good optics, and the tax benefits are substantial. Absolutely, Nathan agreed eagerly. I've been working on a proposal for our corporate social responsibility program. You should focus on private institutions, Bradley advised. More bang for your buck. These public schools are just bottomless pits of funding needs. I felt my cheeks growing hot. The casual dismissal of public education, my life's work, stung. Actually, I said before I could stop myself, public schools provide incredible return on investment when properly funded. They serve the vast majority of American children, including those most in need of educational opportunity. An awkward silence fell over the table. Nathan's grip on my hand tightened painfully. Well, that's certainly one perspective, Richard said finally. Though I think most people who can afford better options exercise them for good reason. The waiting list at Lakeside is 3 years, Heather added. We had to get Cooper on the list before he was even born. I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. The bathroom at Elysium was predictably luxurious. Marble countertops, fresh orchids, and an attendant offering warm towels and designer hand lotion. I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection. Who was this woman in the expensive dress, trying so hard to fit in? What had happened to the confident teacher who stood by her values? As I reapplied my lipstick, the bathroom door opened, and Madison and Heather entered, clearly not noticing me at first, as they continued their conversation. I don't know what Nathan sees in her, Madison was saying. She's pretty enough, I suppose, in that wholesome way, but completely out of her depth. Probably married her before his ambitions kicked in, Heather replied. You know how these things go. First wives are rarely the right fit once men reach a certain level. They spotted me in the mirror and fell silent. I pretended I hadn't heard, nodding politely as I slipped past them back to the dining room. When I returned to the table, the men were discussing an exclusive couples retreat in Bora Bora. It's invitation only, Richard was explaining. The founders want to maintain a certain caliber of attendees. Networking, but at a deeper level. Spouses included. Sounds fascinating, Nathan said. When is it? First week of August. I could probably get you and Amber on the list if you're interested. We're absolutely interested, Nathan declared without so much as a glance in my direction. We'll clear our schedules. August was when I had committed to leading a 2-week literacy workshop for struggling students. I had been planning it for months with my principal's support. Nathan knew this. As more wine flowed, the conversation turned to politics, specifically education funding. Bradley was in the middle of a tirade about property taxes and school budgets. The problem isn't funding, he insisted. It's allocation. These district administrators waste millions on bureaucracy, while teachers complain about buying their own supplies. And the teachers' unions, Richard added. Protecting mediocrity at the expense of excellence. I had remained silent for most of the meal, but this was too much. These men were making sweeping judgments about a system they clearly knew nothing about, beyond their tax implications. I have to respectfully disagree, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. As someone who works in public education, I can tell you that funding absolutely matters. Our district has been cutting essential programs for years: art, music, after-school support. Many families rely on public schools, not just for education, but for meals, counseling services, even basic healthcare screenings. The table fell silent again, but this time I continued. Teachers spend their own money on supplies because they care about their students, not because they're mismanaging funds. And unions protect teachers from exactly the kind of arbitrary judgments being made here by people who have never set foot in a modern public school classroom. I could feel Nathan seething beside me, but something had broken loose inside me. Perhaps the cumulative effect of months of diminishment, or maybe the wine had given me courage. Interesting perspective, Richard said after a pause. Though I think you'll find that those of us who actually understand economics might see things differently. My wife has a doctorate in economics from Princeton, he added, gesturing to Madison. She's published extensively on public funding inefficiencies. And I have a master's in education and 6 years of classroom experience, I replied evenly. With all due respect to theoretical models, there's something to be said for first-hand knowledge. I saw a flash of something. Surprise, possibly respect, in Madison's eyes, quickly masked. Bradley chuckled dismissively. Well, I suppose those who can, do, and those who can't, teach. Isn't that how the saying goes? Nathan's face had turned an alarming shade of red. The server chose that moment to arrive with our main courses, my plate holding 3 small medallions of beef that probably cost more than what I spent on groceries in a week. I think what Amber means, Nathan attempted damage control, is that there are different perspectives on educational funding. She gets rather passionate about her students. No, that's not what I meant, I said quietly but firmly. I meant that dismissing public education without understanding its reality does a disservice to millions of children who don't have the luxury of private alternatives. Richard raised an eyebrow, then turned to Nathan. You didn't mention your wife was so opinionated. It wasn't a compliment. The tension at the table was palpable as our elaborate main courses sat before us, steam rising from artfully arranged plates. Nathan's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see a muscle twitching near his temple. Madison and Heather exchanged meaningful glances, while Bradley studied his wineglass with exaggerated interest. Perhaps we should change the subject, Richard suggested, his tone making it clear. My contribution to the conversation had been unwelcome. Politics and business make for poor dinner companions, as my father always said. Absolutely, Nathan agreed too quickly. Amber sometimes gets carried away with her passion for teaching. He placed his hand over mine on the table, squeezing with unnecessary force. She doesn't always understand the bigger economic picture. The condescension in his voice made my cheeks burn. I gently but firmly removed my hand from his grip. I understand economics well enough to know that investment in education pays dividends for generations, I replied, keeping my voice level. But you're right. Perhaps we should change the subject. Madison stepped in smoothly. Richard and I are hosting a charity gala next month for the Art Museum. The theme is Modern Renaissance. We've commissioned installations from 3 international artists. Sounds wonderful, Nathan said, visibly relieved by the change of topic. You both should attend, she continued, though her eyes flickered briefly to my dress, assessing. Black tie, of course. The governor has confirmed, and there are rumors the senator might make an appearance. We wouldn't miss it, Nathan assured her without consulting me. The conversation shifted to safer topics. The new executive chef at the country club, Bradley's recent acquisition of a limited edition Patek Philippe watch, Heather's daughter being accepted to an exclusive ballet program in Paris. I ate my 3 medallions of beef in tiny bites, trying to make them last, acutely aware of every minute that passed in this excruciating evening. Richard ordered another round of wine, a different vintage this time, but undoubtedly just as expensive. I declined a refill, concerned about both the mounting bill and maintaining my composure. You must try this one, Richard insisted, gesturing for the sommelier to fill my glass despite my protest. It's from a small vineyard in Burgundy that only produces 200 bottles annually. I buy half their inventory each season. Thank you, I murmured, taking the smallest possible sip to be polite. As dessert menus were presented, handwritten on cream-colored cardstock with no prices listed, the discussion turned to an exclusive couples retreat in Bali that Richard and Madison had attended the previous year. The villas are completely private, Madison explained, each with its own infinity pool overlooking the ocean. The chef prepared a 12-course tasting menu every night, completely customized to our preferences. The networking opportunities were invaluable, Richard added. 3 Supreme Court justices were there, plus the CEO of Teltron and his wife. Very intimate gathering, only 50 couples total. They're hosting it again this October, Heather chimed in. Bradley and I have already confirmed. You should join us, Richard said to Nathan. I could put in a word. The waiting list is substantial, but I have some influence with the organizers. We'd be honored, Nathan replied immediately, again without looking at me. October was when I had committed to presenting at an educational conference I had been preparing for all year. It was a significant professional opportunity that could potentially lead to a district curriculum development position. Nathan knew this. We had discussed the importance of this conference extensively when I was applying to be a presenter. Actually, I began. I have a professional commitment in October that's been on the calendar for months. I'm presenting at the National Education. I'm sure Amber can rearrange her schedule for something of this caliber, Nathan interrupted, giving me a look that clearly said, shut up. The retreat is quite exclusive, Madison added with faux sympathy. Invitations are selective. It would be a shame to miss the opportunity. I took another sip of the outrageously expensive wine, wondering when exactly I had become an accessory in my husband's life rather than a partner. When had my career become insignificant compared to his networking opportunities? When had I become someone whose time and commitments could be casually dismissed? Richard signaled for the server, who approached with practiced deference. We'll have the chocolate soufflé for the table, he ordered, and the tableside cognac service. Excellent choice, sir, the server replied. The soufflés take 20 minutes to prepare. Would you like to order now so we can begin? Yes. And bring another bottle of the Romani Conti while we wait. I glanced at Nathan, wondering if he was keeping track of the expenditure. His expression gave nothing away, but I knew our credit card had a $15,000 limit that was already stretched from his recent clothing purchases. How exactly was he planning to pay for this extravagant meal? As the server departed, the conversation shifted to politics once again, with Richard lamenting recent changes to capital gains tax regulations. It's highway robbery, he complained. The government treating investors like ATMs while wasting billions on social programs that accomplish nothing. Bradley nodded in agreement. My accountant is working overtime finding legitimate shelters. I refuse to hand over half my earnings to fund bureaucratic incompetence. What's your perspective, Amber? Richard asked suddenly, his tone suggesting he was testing me rather than genuinely interested in my opinion. You work in the public sector. Do you see the waste firsthand? It felt like a trap, but after an evening of silencing myself, something in me rebelled against the path of least resistance. Actually, I see the opposite, I replied carefully. I see underfunded schools struggling to meet the needs of diverse student populations. I see dedicated professionals working with inadequate resources because they believe in public education as an equalizer. Nathan shifted uncomfortably beside me. The problem isn't that social programs receive too much funding, I continued. It's that priorities get misaligned. For instance, our district cut the music program while the superintendent received a bonus. That's not an argument against public funding. It's an argument for oversight and community involvement. But surely you must admit that the private sector manages resources more efficiently, Bradley pressed. Efficiency isn't always the right metric for human services, I countered. Education isn't manufacturing. We're not producing widgets, we're developing minds. Some processes can't and shouldn't be optimized for cost efficiency. Richard laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Spoken like someone who's never had to meet a quarterly earnings projection or satisfy shareholders. No, I acknowledged. Just like you've never had to explain to a hungry child that the breakfast program has been cut, Or tell a parent their child won't receive reading intervention services because we don't have enough specialists. The atmosphere at the table had grown frigid. Nathan was staring straight ahead, a muscle working in his jaw. Education should be run like a business, Bradley insisted. Reward performance, cut what doesn't work, and let the market determine value. Children aren't commodities, I replied, and not everything of value can be measured by market forces. Some investments yield returns that don't appear on balance sheets. That's a convenient perspective when you're spending other people's money, Richard remarked. I pay taxes too, I pointed out, and I choose to work in a field where my performance bonus is a child learning to read or overcoming a learning challenge, not a year-end check. The soufflés arrived, momentarily pausing the increasingly heated discussion. The server made a show of piercing each delicate chocolate dome and pouring warm ganache inside. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the theatrical presentation and undoubtedly exquisite flavor. Now, each bite felt like ash in my mouth. Well, Richard said after sampling his dessert, it seems Nathan failed to mention he married an idealist. The way he said idealist made it sound like a character flaw or a disease. Nathan's face had turned that alarming shade of red again. Amber sometimes gets carried away with theoretical perspectives, he said, not looking at me. She hasn't had much exposure to the realities of corporate America. I wouldn't call teaching 33rd graders with diverse needs and limited resources theoretical, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. It's actually quite practical work. I think what Nathan means, Madison interjected with false sweetness, is that different worlds operate by different rules. The public sector has certain luxuries that business doesn't. Luxuries? I repeated, genuinely bewildered. The luxury of idealism, she clarified, of not having to justify every expenditure to shareholders or demonstrate measurable returns on investment. I justify my methods and outcomes constantly, I corrected her. To administrators, to parents, to standardized testing metrics. The difference is that my shareholders are children whose futures depend on the foundation we provide. Richard raised an eyebrow. Passionate, aren't you, about education? Absolutely. It must be nice, Bradley commented, having such certainty about your calling. Most of us have to operate in shades of gray. His condescension was unbearable. These people had spent the evening discussing private islands, $100,000 watches, and wine that cost more than my monthly salary, yet somehow I was the one being painted as out of touch with reality. I think what my colleagues are trying to say, Richard said, his tone patronizing, is that theoretical ideals about public funding sound lovely coming from someone who teaches finger painting to 8-year-olds, but those of us responsible for generating the wealth that funds these programs might have more informed perspectives on fiscal efficiency. Something snapped inside me. I teach reading, writing, mathematics, science, history, and yes, art to 8-year-olds. I assess learning disabilities, recognize signs of home instability, differentiate instruction for gifted students, English language learners, and children with special needs, sometimes all in the same lesson. I communicate with families from diverse backgrounds, mediate peer conflicts, and create an environment where 30 unique individuals can learn and grow together. I paused, aware that my voice had risen slightly. So perhaps before dismissing educators as glorified babysitters, you might consider that we're performing one of society's most complex and consequential tasks, preparing the next generation to solve problems we haven't even identified yet. Silence fell over the table. Madison looked uncomfortable, Heather seemed mildly impressed, and Bradley appeared annoyed. Richard's expression was unreadable, but it was Nathan's face that shocked me. He was staring at me with naked fury, as if I had betrayed him in the most fundamental way possible. Nathan's chair scraped against the floor as he abruptly stood, throwing his linen napkin onto the table. The movement was so sudden that a nearby server startled, nearly dropping a tray of drinks. "That's enough," Nathan said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "I think you've made your point, Amber." All eyes at the table were fixed on him, then shifted to me. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. "I apologize," Nathan addressed Richard and the others, completely ignoring me. I should have known this would happen. This is exactly why I was hesitant to bring her tonight. Richard raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Madison and Heather exchanged glances that combined shock with a hint of satisfied vindication. Bradley looked mildly amused, as if watching an entertaining but distasteful spectacle. "Nathan," I said quietly, "I don't understand what. This is why I didn't want to bring you," he cut me off, voice rising. Several diners at nearby tables turned to look. "You're embarrassing me. You've been embarrassing me all night." My cheeks burned as I became acutely aware of the attention we were attracting. The elegant dining room had grown quieter, conversations pausing as people discreetly observed our unfolding drama. "I don't think this is the place to," I began, trying to diffuse the situation. "You're a disgrace to this table, and to me," Nathan declared loudly. The words hit me like physical blows. "I've spent months trying to help you fit in, to elevate you to the level of people like the Kensingtons and Thompsons, and you repay me by spouting your simplistic, bleeding heart nonsense and contradicting everyone." The silence in our corner of the restaurant was absolute now. Even the servers had paused, uncertain how to proceed. I felt dizzy with humiliation, unable to believe this was actually happening. Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should call it a night," he suggested, his tone carefully neutral. "An excellent idea," Nathan agreed. "I apologize for my wife's behavior, Richard. This won't happen again." The implication was clear, because I wouldn't be invited again. To my horror, Nathan then turned to the others. "Shall we continue our discussion at the Marquee Club? I'm a member, and they serve an excellent 30-year Macallan." "Sounds perfect," Bradley replied, standing and helping Heather with her chair. "Delightful," Madison agreed, gathering her designer clutch. They were leaving, all of them, including my husband. "Nathan," I said, finding my voice despite the shock. "What are you doing?" He barely glanced at me. "What I should have done hours ago. Salvaging this evening with the people who actually matter to my career." Richard signaled discreetly to a server, who hurried over. "Please put the wine on my account," he instructed. "The rest of the bill." He looked at Nathan expectantly. "Give it to my wife," Nathan said dismissively. "She's so passionate about economic responsibility. Let's see how she handles this one." With that parting shot, he turned and walked away. The others followed, Madison giving me a look that might almost have contained a flicker of pity before they disappeared toward the exit. I sat alone at the large round table, surrounded by half-finished soufflés and nearly empty wine glasses, feeling as if I'd been struck by lightning. The conversations around the restaurant gradually resumed, though I could feel curious glances directed my way. A server approached cautiously. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" I couldn't find words to respond. What could I possibly say? That my husband had just publicly humiliated me and abandoned me in a restaurant I could never afford? "Would you like me to clear these plates?" he asked when I remained silent. "Yes, thank you," I managed, my voice barely audible. "And will you be requiring anything else this evening?" Just the bill, please." He nodded professionally, though I detected a hint of sympathy in his eyes. "Of course, ma'am. I'll bring it right away." As he gathered the dishes, I sat in stunned disbelief, replaying the events of the evening in my mind. Had this really happened? Had Nathan, my husband of 5 years, the man who once held my hand through my father's heart surgery and surprised me with breakfast in bed on ordinary Sundays, really just called me a disgrace and abandoned me? The server returned with a leather folder and placed it discreetly on the table. "Take your time, ma'am. No rush at all." I opened the folder and felt the blood drain from my face. The total at the bottom of the elegantly printed bill read $5,243.87. $5,243.87. More than 2 months of my take-home salary as a teacher. With trembling hands, I reached for my purse and extracted my wallet. I carried 2 credit cards, a personal one with a $3,000 limit that was already halfway to maxed out from buying the dress I was wearing, and a joint card with Nathan that had a $15,000 limit but was similarly strained from Nathan's recent spending. I tried the joint card first, praying it would go through. The server took it and disappeared to process the payment. Less than a minute later, he returned with an apologetic expression. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. The card has been declined." My stomach dropped. "Could you please try again? Sometimes the system makes errors." Of course. He left and returned once more with the same result. "I'm afraid it's still being declined, ma'am." Humiliation burned through me as I handed him my personal card, knowing it couldn't possibly cover the full amount. As expected, it too was declined. "Is there perhaps another card you could try?" he asked delicately. I don't have another card," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do." The server looked genuinely concerned. "Would you like me to speak with the manager? Perhaps we can make arrangements." "Yes, please," I said, fighting back tears. As he walked away, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. There was only one person I could call in this situation: my sister Jessica. We had always been close, and she had a better-paying job as a pharmaceutical sales representative. I hated to ask her for help, but I was desperate. She answered on the third ring. "Amber? Everything okay? It's pretty late." "Jess," I choked out, unable to keep my voice steady. "I need your help. I'm at a restaurant called Elysium, and Nathan left me here with a $5,000 bill that I can't pay." "He what?" Her voice rose in disbelief. "What do you mean he left you?" Through tears, I gave her a abbreviated version of what had happened. "That absolute bastard," she said when I finished. "Sit tight. I'm on my way. Don't move, don't stress. I'll handle it." "Jess, it's over $5,000, I reminded her, wiping at my tears. "I don't care if it's 10,000. No one treats my sister like that. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And Amber? This isn't your fault." I ended the call just as the manager approached, a tall woman in an impeccable suit who introduced herself as Miss Winters. "I understand there's an issue with the payment," she said, her tone professional but not unkind. "My husband left unexpectedly," I explained, mortification making my voice quaver. "My sister is on her way with a card that should work. She'll be here in about 20 minutes. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." Miss Winters nodded. "These situations happen more often than you might think. Would you like some tea while you wait? Complimentary, of course." Her kindness nearly broke me. "Yes, please, thank you." She signaled to a server, who soon returned with a pot of herbal tea. I sat alone at the massive table, sipping tea I couldn't taste, aware of curious and occasionally pitying glances from the remaining diners. True to her word, Jessica arrived 18 minutes later. I watched her scan the dining room, her expression shifting from concern to fury when she spotted me sitting alone. She strode over, designer heels clicking determinedly on the marble floor, and embraced me without a word. "I'm going to kill him," she whispered in my ear. "Not here," I whispered back. "Let's just pay and go." Jessica handled everything with the composed efficiency that had made her successful in her career. She produced a platinum credit card, signed the bill without flinching at the total, and left a generous tip that made the server's eyes widen. "Let's get you out of here," she said, helping me gather my things. I walked out of Elysium with as much dignity as I could muster, Jessica's arm linked protectively through mine. The valet brought her BMW around, and as we settled into its leather seats, the emotional dam finally broke. I sobbed, deep, racking sobs that came from the very core of my being. Jessica drove in silence, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand, letting me release the shock and humiliation of the evening. "He called me a disgrace," I managed between sobs. "In front of everyone, and then he just left." "He's the disgrace," Jessica replied, her voice tight with anger. "Not you, never you." As the city lights blurred through my tears, I realized something fundamental had broken tonight. Not just the evening, not just my pride, but my marriage itself. The question was, had it been broken all along, and I just hadn't wanted to see it? Jessica drove me to her apartment instead of taking me home. "You're not going back there tonight," she said firmly when I protested. "Not after what he did." Her place was a modern one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. She led me to her bedroom, found me a pair of soft pajamas, and gently guided me to the bathroom. "Wash your face, change your clothes, and then we'll talk," she instructed. I did as she suggested, mechanically removing the makeup I'd applied so carefully hours earlier. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, with red-rimmed eyes and smeared mascara. I hardly recognized myself. When I emerged, Jessica had made a pot of chamomile tea and arranged comfort food on the coffee table: crackers, cheese, and the emergency chocolate she always kept in her pantry. She patted the couch beside her. "Okay, I need the whole story," she said. "Not just the restaurant disaster. What's been happening, Amber? This can't have come out of nowhere." With her gentle prompting, I began to talk, really talk, about the changes in Nathan and our marriage over the past 6 months. The criticisms, the exclusion, the gradual erosion of my confidence and identity. As I spoke, patterns emerged that had been invisible to me when I was living through them day by day. He started controlling what I wore, I realized aloud. First as suggestions, then as outright criticism. "Classic isolation and control tactics," Jessica said, her expression grim, and he began dismissing my job, my friends, even the way I speak. Like I was something to be fixed or hidden. "Because you're a reminder of his own middle-class roots," Jessica pointed out. "The part of himself he's trying to erase." We talked until nearly 3 in the morning. Jessica, always the practical one, took notes as patterns of emotional manipulation emerged. The separate banking accounts Nathan had insisted on for tax purposes. The way he had gradually taken control of our joint credit cards. How he had convinced me to put my teaching awards away because they cluttered the living room. The subtle undermining of my relationships with friends he deemed not ambitious enough. "Amber," Jessica said finally, setting down her notepad, "this is textbook emotional abuse." "That's a strong word," I protested weakly. "Is it? He systematically isolated you from friends, undermined your confidence, controlled your appearance and finances, and then publicly humiliated you before abandoning you with a bill he knew you couldn't pay." She counted the points off on her fingers. "If a student's parent described this relationship to you, what would you tell them?" She was right, and we both knew it. If one of my students' mothers had shared this story during a parent conference, I would have gently slipped a domestic violence resource card into her purse. "I just can't believe I didn't see it," I whispered. "I'm an educated woman. I consider myself reasonably intelligent." "Abuse doesn't care about your education level or intelligence," Jessica replied. "And it doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual, like a frog in slowly heating water. By the time it's boiling, you've acclimated to each incremental increase in temperature." My phone, which I'd silenced hours ago, buzzed with an incoming text. It was nearly 3:30 a.m. "Nathan, where are you? We need to talk." A moment later, another text arrived. "Nathan, I'm at the Marriott downtown, room 1142. I need some space to think." "He needs space to think?" Jessica read over my shoulder, voice dripping with sarcasm. "After what he did, he thinks he's the injured party?" I stared at the messages, feeling strangely detached. He expected me to come home and wait for him, like a chastened child. "Of course he did," Jessica said. "Because that's the dynamic he's created. He acts however he wants, and you accommodate him." I turned off my phone without responding. "I'm exhausted." "Sleep," Jessica said, pulling out extra blankets for the couch. "Everything looks clearer in the morning, and Amber, I'm proud of you for calling me tonight. That took courage." I managed a weak smile. What choice did I have? Prison orange isn't my color. It was a feeble joke, but Jessica laughed anyway, and for a moment, the weight on my chest lightened slightly. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of Nathan's face contorted with disgust as he called me a disgrace, over and over. I woke just after 9, disoriented and emotionally drained. Jessica had already been up for hours, her laptop open on the kitchen counter. "I called your principal," she announced when I shuffled into the kitchen. "Told her you had a family emergency and needed a personal day." "Jess, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. And I called Mom, too." "You told Mom?" I felt a flash of embarrassment. Not everything. Just that you and Nathan had a serious fight and you're staying with me. She's worried but not panicking. Jessica pushed a mug of coffee toward me. Check your email. Nathan sent something at 6:17 this morning. I pulled out my phone with trepidation. Sure enough, there was an email from Nathan with the subject line, "Last night." The message was coldly professional, as if addressed to a disappointing employee rather than a wife. Amber, I need space to process what happened last night. Your behavior at dinner was inappropriate and embarrassing. I've checked into the Marriott for a few days to consider our future. I expect you to use this time to reflect on your actions and priorities. We'll discuss next steps when I return. Nathan, no apology. No acknowledgement of abandoning me with an impossible bill. No recognition of the public humiliation he had inflicted. Unbelievable, I whispered, passing the phone to Jessica. She scanned the email, her expression darkening. This is gaslighting 101. He's trying to make you question your own reality, as if you were the one who did something wrong. She set the phone down with deliberate care, as if resisting the urge to throw it. How do you feel about going to your place to get some things? I think you should stay here for a while. The thought of returning to the home I shared with Nathan filled me with dread, but I nodded. I need clothes for work tomorrow. And my lesson plans. And your important documents, Jessica added. Birth certificate, social security card, passport, just in case. You think that's necessary? I asked, alarmed by the implication. I think it's prudent, she replied. Better to have them and not need them. We drove to my house in tense silence. I felt like an intruder in my own home as I unlocked the door, half expecting Nathan to be waiting despite his email. The house was silent and undisturbed, exactly as I had left it the previous evening, except for the absence of hope and security I had once felt within these walls. Jessica was methodical, helping me gather not just clothes and toiletries, but also financial statements, insurance policies, and other important papers. As we worked, she pointed out things I had been blind to. How few photos of my family were displayed compared to Nathan's. How my teaching awards and master's degree were stored in a box in the closet, while Nathan's business accolades occupied the den. How even the books on our shelves were predominantly his choices. I need to check something, I said, moving to our home office. I logged into our online banking, where Nathan had insisted we maintain separate accounts alongside one joint account for household expenses. My personal account held my modest teacher's salary, with a balance that would barely cover next month's expenses. The joint account, where we both contributed proportionally to our incomes, was nearly empty, far less than it should have been, based on our regular deposits. Jess, look at this, I called her over. The joint account has less than $200. We should have at least $3,000 for bills and emergencies. Jessica looked over my shoulder as I navigated through recent transactions. There were multiple withdrawals and transfers over the past 3 months, all initiated by Nathan, all without my knowledge. He's been systematically draining the account, Jessica observed. Small enough amounts that you might not notice individually, but they add up. But why? His salary is 4 times mine. Check his personal account if you can access it, Jessica suggested. I couldn't view balances, but I could see Nathan's scheduled transfers as a joint account holder. What I found made my stomach clench. Nathan had set up a recurring transfer of $4,000 monthly to an account I didn't recognize. What is this account? I murmured, noting the details. Let me see. Jessica took a photo of the account information with her phone. I have a friend who works in banking. She might be able to tell us something without breaking any rules. As we continued searching, I found credit card statements showing charges for restaurants, hotels, and jewelry stores on days when Nathan had claimed to be working late or traveling for business. One charge stood out, a $7,800 payment to Tiffany & Co. from 3 weeks ago. He never gave me anything from Tiffany's, I said, the implication dawning slowly. Jessica's expression was sympathetic but unsurprised. Let's keep looking. In a folder labeled Investment Opportunities, I found something that made my blood run cold. Emails between Nathan and a real estate agent discussing a beachfront property in the Hamptons. The most recent exchange, dated just 2 weeks ago, included this line from Nathan. Madison and I are excited to see the property next month. If it's as perfect as it sounds, we'll be ready to make an offer immediately. Madison Kensington, the CEO's wife. Oh my God, I breathed, showing Jessica the email. That son of a bitch, she whispered. How long has this been going on? I scrolled through more emails, finding increasingly intimate exchanges dating back nearly 4 months. In them, Nathan and Madison discussed not just real estate, but their future together once Nathan resolved his current situation, meaning me. He's been planning to leave me, I realized, my voice hollow. This dinner wasn't just about networking. It was about showing Madison he was ready to cut ties. And he used you as the scapegoat, Jessica concluded, creating a scene where you appeared to be the problem, giving him the perfect excuse to end things. I sat back in the chair, a strange calm settling over me. The hurt was still there, a deep, throbbing pain in my chest. But alongside it arose something unexpected: clarity. The fog of confusion and self-doubt that had enveloped me for months was lifting, revealing the harsh but undeniable truth. I need to call a lawyer, I said. Jessica squeezed my shoulder. Yes, you do. But first, let's get everything you need out of this house. As we packed my car with clothing, documents, and a few sentimental items, I felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. Something precious had died. My marriage, my trust, my vision of the future. But with that death came the possibility of rebirth. Ready? Jessica asked as I locked the front door. I took one last look at the house that had been my home for 5 years. Yes, I said with surprising steadiness. I'm ready. The woman who drove away from that house was not the same one who had left it the previous evening, nervous about a dinner with her husband's colleagues. That woman had been diminished by months of subtle degradation, her identity eroded by 1,000 tiny cuts. This woman, the one gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, following her sister's car back to safety, was beginning to remember who she had been before. A dedicated teacher, a woman of principle and passion, someone who deserved respect, not contempt, and she was starting to get angry. The next 3 days were a blur of practical activity. Jessica's friend from college, Sarah, was a family law attorney who agreed to meet with me on Sunday afternoon, despite it being her day off. She reviewed the financial documents and emails we had gathered, her expression growing increasingly serious. This is actually helpful for your case, she explained, indicating Nathan's email about his current situation with Madison. It establishes intent to abandon the marriage and evidence of marital assets being hidden. So what do I do now? I asked. First, protect yourself financially. Open a new account at a different bank and redirect your next paycheck there. Second, document everything, every text, email, and interaction. And third, decide what you want from this divorce. Divorce. The word hung in the air, simultaneously devastating and liberating. I don't want to punish him, I said after a moment. I just want what's fair. Sarah smiled approvingly. That's a healthy attitude. Many clients start wanting blood, which rarely ends well for anyone. Let's focus on getting you a fair settlement and a clean break. Monday morning arrived, and I returned to my classroom with a strange sense of unreality. Had it really been only 3 days since the disastrous dinner at Elysium? I felt years older, yet somehow lighter, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. My third graders noticed nothing amiss, greeting me with their usual enthusiasm. Their normalcy was therapeutic. Here, I was still Miss Reynolds, respected and valued for exactly who I was. During my lunch break, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls and a text from Nathan. Coming home tonight. Be there at 7. We need to talk. Not a request, a command. 6 months ago, I would have rearranged my schedule to accommodate him. Today, I typed a different response. I'm staying with Jessica. If you want to talk, we can meet in a public place, or you can contact my attorney. Her information is below. I included Sarah's contact details and returned to my classroom, heart pounding but resolve firm. Nathan's response came minutes later. Attorney? Don't be dramatic. This is between us. I didn't reply. By Wednesday, Nathan had shifted tactics, his messages vacillating between anger, "You're overreacting to a simple disagreement," and "wounded innocence. I don't understand why you're doing this to us." When those approaches failed, he tried guilt. "Your mother called me, worried sick about you." And finally, half-hearted remorse. "I may have overreacted at dinner." Not once did he acknowledge abandoning me with a $5,000 bill, much less apologize for it. Not once did he address the emails with Madison or the missing money from our joint account. His concern was entirely focused on my disproportionate reaction, as if I were a child having a tantrum. Sarah advised minimal contact, suggesting I respond only to messages regarding practical matters like bill payments or collecting belongings. "Emotional manipulation is his primary tool," she warned. "Don't give him opportunities to use it." By Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the Elysium disaster, Nathan's tone had shifted again. Now he wanted to meet to discuss reconciliation. I agreed to meet him Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop near Jessica's apartment, public enough to discourage a scene, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a clear view of both the entrance and exit. I dressed with deliberate care in clothes that made me feel confident: dark jeans, a blue blouse that brought out my eyes, and the comfortable ankle boots Nathan had always criticized as too casual. My wedding ring was absent, left in a small dish on Jessica's bathroom counter. Nathan arrived precisely on time, looking simultaneously immaculate and exhausted. His suit was perfectly pressed, but dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally clean-shaven face showed a day's worth of stubble. "Amber," he said, sliding into the seat opposite me. "Thank you for meeting me. What do you want to discuss, Nathan?" I kept my voice level, professional. He seemed taken aback by my directness. "I think we need to talk about what happened and how to move forward." "I'm listening." He launched into a carefully crafted speech about miscommunications and mutual misunderstandings, describing the Elysium incident as unfortunate, but blown out of proportion. "We both said things we didn't mean," he concluded. "The important thing now is to put this behind us and focus on our future." I studied him as he spoke, seeing him with new clarity. This man had once been the center of my world, the person I trusted most. Now I recognized the subtle manipulations in his language, the way he framed our issues as mutual when his behavior had been unilateral, how he minimized serious offenses as unfortunate, his assumption that reconciliation was the obvious path forward. "Are you finished?" I asked when he paused. He blinked, surprised by my tone. "I'm trying to save our marriage, Amber. Our marriage ended when you called me a disgrace in front of your colleagues, left me with a $5,000 bill you knew I couldn't pay, and then spent the night in a hotel rather than checking if I was even okay." I was angry. "I've been gathering financial records," I continued, not allowing him to interrupt. "The transfers from our joint account, the secret credit card charges, your correspondence with Madison Kensington about purchasing property together." The color drained from his face. "You went through my private emails?" "They were on our shared computer, Nathan. Just like our shared account that you've been systematically draining." "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I countered. "You've been planning to leave me for months." The dinner at Elysium wasn't about networking. It was about creating a public scenario where you could paint me as the problem. He started to speak, then stopped, recalibrating. "Amber, whatever you think you've found has been misinterpreted. Madison and I have a professional relationship." "Stop lying," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I have the emails where you discuss your future together once you've resolved your current situation. That's me, right? Your current situation?" Nathan's expression hardened. "This isn't like you, Amber. You're being paranoid and vindictive." "No, Nathan. For the first time in months, I'm being clear-sighted." I leaned forward slightly. "I've already spoken with an attorney. I'm filing for divorce on grounds of abandonment and financial misconduct." "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "On a teacher's salary? My lawyers will bury you. Actually, I have excellent representation. And thanks to your emails about planning to leave me for Madison, plus the documented financial transactions, I think you'll find I'm in a stronger position than you believe." His confident facade cracked slightly. "What exactly do you want?" "What I've always wanted: fairness and respect. Since you're evidently incapable of providing the latter, I'll settle for the former in the form of an equitable division of assets." "This isn't you talking," he insisted. "It's your sister, or some shark lawyer filling your head with ideas." "That's where you're wrong, Nathan. This is me, the real me you've been trying to erase for months. The woman with opinions and values you found so embarrassing at dinner." I stood, gathering my purse. "I've already packed your things. They're in storage unit 147 at Safe Keep on Monroe Street. The key is with my attorney. You can contact her to arrange pickup." "You packed my things?" For the first time, genuine shock registered on his face. "You can't just—" "I already did. The lease is in my name, remember? You insisted on that arrangement to protect your assets." Ironic how that worked out. As I turned to leave, Nathan grabbed my wrist. "Amber, wait. We can work this out. I made a mistake with Madison, I admit it, but 5 years of marriage has to count for something." I looked pointedly at his hand until he released me. "It counted for something, Nathan. That's why your things are in storage instead of the dumpster. That's why I'm seeking an equitable settlement instead of taking you for everything you have." I left him sitting there, mouth slightly open, in disbelief. The woman he had systematically diminished, the wife he had expected to cower and apologize, had instead stood her ground. It was likely the first time in his privileged life that Nathan Reynolds hadn't been able to manipulate a situation to his advantage. The divorce proceedings were neither quick nor easy. Nathan initially contested everything, hiring an aggressive attorney who attempted to paint me as unstable and financially irresponsible. But the evidence was too substantial to overcome. The emails with Madison, the financial records, multiple witnesses to the Elysium incident, including the restaurant manager, who provided a statement confirming Nathan had abandoned me with the bill. What Nathan hadn't counted on was my resilience. The same determination that had carried me through college while working part-time, that had helped me reach struggling students when others had given up, now fueled me through the legal battle. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice and closure. 6 months after that fateful dinner, the divorce was finalized. The settlement included a fair division of our assets and a year of alimony to help me transition to full financial independence, considerably more generous than Nathan's initial offers, which had amounted to little more than the clothes on my back. I later heard through mutual acquaintances that Madison had ended things with Nathan shortly after our divorce proceedings began. Apparently, Richard Kensington had been less than pleased to discover his wife's affair with a junior executive, particularly one foolish enough to leave a paper trail. Nathan's promising career at Morgan Financial had stalled accordingly. As for me, I returned to my classroom with renewed passion. The experience had left scars, certainly, but also wisdom and strength I might never have discovered otherwise. I recognized now how gradually I had allowed Nathan to diminish me, how I had compromised my authentic self in small increments until I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Never again. 1 year after the Elysium incident, I accepted a position as Curriculum Development Coordinator for our school district, a role that recognized my teaching excellence while allowing me to impact education on a broader scale. I bought a small but charming townhouse with a garden where I could grow the herbs Nathan had always discouraged as too suburban. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage and formed new relationships based on mutual respect rather than superficial status. I even started dating again, casually at first, then more seriously with Michael, a kind-hearted architect who valued my passion for education and never, ever tried to change who I was. The lesson I learned from my failed marriage wasn't that love is unreliable or that trust is foolish. Rather, I learned that respecting yourself is the essential foundation for any healthy relationship. When you know your worth, you recognize disrespect more quickly. When you value your authentic self, you don't tolerate someone trying to reshape you into their ideal. Sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most necessary growth. Being called a disgrace and abandoned with a $5,000 dinner bill was humiliating, but it also forced me to confront the slow erosion of my identity that had been happening for months. In the moment I sat alone at that elegant table in Elysium, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. But from that smallness came the determination to reclaim my power and remember my worth. If you've ever felt diminished by someone who claimed to love you, I hope my story reminds you that you deserve respect. You deserve to be valued for exactly who you are, not who someone else thinks you should be. The journey back to yourself might be difficult, but it's always worth taking. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it felt like the whole world was against you? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to always honor your true self, no matter what.